Welcome back to another episode of Consciously Clueless. I'm your host, Carly, and here we break down complex issues around health, the climate crisis, and social justice through a vegan lens. We'll talk about the magic link between your well-being and the planet's health, because luckily, choosing a healthier, mindful lifestyle for yourself often creates healthier vibes for our planet too. Staying consciously clueless means getting to show up knowing nothing, but staying open to all that you can learn. From feasting on plant-based meals and reducing waste to learning to meditate, every step you take contributes to your wellness and makes systematic change for the world. You can make a difference. This podcast will show you how. I've had different ideas, and I try and plan out episodes, especially these solo episodes, in advance if I need to do any research or look into anything. And there's been so much going on in the world that I want to share and respond to and weave into the show that keeps changing. So these episodes have been a little quicker turnaround, but I hope that you enjoy them and it makes them a bit more topical, I guess. So, reminder, if you are listening to this podcast, first of all, that's amazing. Thank you for being here. And second of all, if you're watching this, or if you want to be, you're on patreon.com/consciouslycarly. Head there. If that is something you're interested in, you can watch this video. I have bonus content with Consciously Cannabis episodes. Often I am smoking with guests. There is a lot going on Patreon, so go check that out. From different levels, different content, different ways to interact with me. There's a lot going on over there, so definitely check it out. Think of it as the VIP section of Consciously Clueless. Today's episode is inspired by another podcast I work on, actually. So I love doing this so much, this meaning podcasting, that I have found other ways to host and produce shows. One of the other shows I produce is with my local radio station, WTIP. It is called the OtterPod. I help 7th and 8th graders in a local charter school, GES, make a podcast about issues that matter to them. And this season is more of the interpersonal stuff. One of the episodes for this season that they've chosen, they make a list of topics they want to dive into based on some of their curriculum and things going on in their lives. They brought up climate change anxiety and the idea that their generation is being handed a world on fire, more or less. And of course, I supported that choice in this episode and was eager to hear, because I'm really just there to help them with the podcasting end, and I do the editing. I go in and guide them on making an episode, what makes an episode, but they're doing research, they're putting together the content, writing a script. It's pretty incredible. You should check that out on whatever streaming platform you're on now. The OtterPod is there as well. And it's inspiring. But it was also really interesting to hear teens talk honestly about our future and how they feel about it. And while they were recording this episode, they recorded yesterday from when I'm recording this episode, so it's fresh in my mind. It made me think of an article I read from Isaiah Hernandez, known online as Queer Brown Vegan, about climate doomism. And it's a term I'd heard previously and talked about maybe inadvertently on the podcast previously. I had an ecotherapist on. We talked about climate change anxiety. That's a great episode. That episode was with ecotherapist Maya Kiley, and it's episode 182. I also did an episode earlier than that, episode 152, about climate change anxiety, just a solo episode. So this feels like a little bit of an update to that. Maybe an add-on, a part 2, if you will. And the idea of climate doomism, I've seen online and in some of the spaces and forums I look at. And I wanted to talk about it a little bit and talk through what it means, how it comes up, and then what's going on in the world to keep us from falling into this doomism, basically. I have this definition from queerbrownvegan.com. What is climate doomism? The article, I'll link it in the show notes. We can refer to climate doomism as the pathway to ecological destruction due to anthropogenic actions created by human society. Climate doomism is used as a scare tactic to disempower collective communities on their journey for environmental liberation. It's a popularized term that has risen on social media by predominantly media news outlets exclaiming that there's no hope left in the future for the planet, right? The doomism part. So we are seeing that there is mass destruction to the planet. And then the takeaway from that, the doomism part, is saying, well, who the hell cares? We're doomed. And why try and why do anything and why support people who can do things and all of that, right? So, first of all, I want to remember that feeling overwhelmed, especially for communities of color and other marginalized communities that are going to feel these effects harder and faster. Frustration, anger, feeling overwhelmed, these are all valid things. The doomism part is when we go from seeing the reality to choosing to do nothing and feeling and being told to do nothing and being disempowered and being shown that doing nothing is really your only option. That's different than seeing the reality, because we're not sugarcoating things. We're not pretending the shit is not existing, but we are seeing it, and then we are saying, what can I do? How can I help? And that's a different energy, right? That's not only different for your mental health, but different for what happens in the planet. There are some issues here with communicating what's going on with climate change and what's going on with the environment. There's a really cool article on atmos.earth. I'll link this in the show notes as well. The time paradox of climate change. And basically in the article, it was saying that past environmental movements have often been hinged on a response to a disaster. And that motivates people differently, right? Think about if you're even setting a goal in your own life. If you're setting a goal for the day, it's a bit easier than being like, okay, yeah, I have to do this thing sometime in the next 5 years or whatever it is. That's a different energy. You put that on the back burner. And so when some of the science has come out in the last few years and there's been this many years left, that is the reality in terms of like warming and how much we have to mitigate that and greenhouse gases. But then there becomes this false sense of maybe there's time to deal with that down the road, which is what this article is arguing, that there is not the same sense of urgency. So it's interesting to think about that, right? How do you create a sense of urgency without creating a sense of doom? And I have some answers, of course, and some thoughts, but I don't think there's a perfect answer. I don't have the perfect answer to that question because it is a constant challenge for myself in staying in that lane and staying in the lane of what can I do and not feeling overwhelmed and not giving in to some of the messaging that is made me feel some doomism, to keep using that word, but to not stay in that. So I just thought that was interesting in terms of how do we present that and say, this is important, we need to do something now, without saying it's too late, right? I do take a lot of comfort as I continue to learn. I am continuing to learn all the time, that there is so much science and technology that already exists to help some of the problems in our environment currently. It's, of course, always coming back to money and control, and who is controlling the industries that are polluting and who is getting money, and all of those things are influencing if these technologies are being used. But so many things exist. So going back to this climate doomism, I did some research, and there was a video in, 2021, October, by a TikTok creator named Charles McBird. And he posted a video and was basically like, I'm a climate doomer. I don't believe there's hope. I'm overwhelmed. And he also said, please, scientists, activists on this app, prove me wrong. I need help, which is interesting. And there is a woman I follow called the Garbage Queen. You can follow her on TikTok or Instagram, Elena Wood. And she responded, and a lot of people responded to him, but hers also kind of took off then. And she was saying she understood. She gets it. She is an activist. She continues to learn these things. And then she started sharing, here are reasons why it's not too late. Here is the technology that exists. Here is why we have power as people to push that, and sparked this whole conversation about kind of fighting through this doomism feeling. And she also talked about how young people often feel this. Going back to where we started, this episode I helped some local 7th and 8th graders record this week, because there is so much. They get to, in a beautiful way, know more and are told more and are asking and demanding to know more than I did at that age, and than many people did at that age. I am so impressed, empowered, in awe of the younger generation or two that are already fighting so hard for this world. And it hurts sometimes because they have to do that, but the change they are making is incredible, and we owe them a lot in some of the advancements in our world right now, which is something I want to talk about later too. But I think that young people also see that fear goes viral. I see that. I see what posts do more when I'm poking at things that might upset people, or talking about animal agriculture really gets people. Like, there are things take off, and fear takes off, and it's real. But landing in that and staying in that, I think, first of all, is just really bad for yourself. It is bad for your own mental health. It is dismal to keep going in a world that you think is ultimately doomed. Genuinely. And of course, there is some genuine thought on my part about that as well. I am not saying that I am like outside of this realm, or that it is just people that are in their teen years. I think everyone is having these thoughts for a reason. But fear goes viral, and that's not always the most helpful if that also doesn't have ways to move forward. And I was so impressed and proud of the OtterPod episode we recorded yesterday, because these 3 young teens that put together the script for this episode had ways to make a difference in your independent life, with your lifestyle choices, your everyday. And they were also like, contact your politicians. Change needs to happen on all levels. And they are already saying that. I would not have been saying that at 13. That was not in my consciousness in any sense of the place at all. And it's pretty inspiring. And I think an example of that, an example to keep all of us going, is what students and young people have been able to accomplish right now. I have been, again, in debt, in gratitude, in awe of the students at universities and colleges around the world that have been protesting and calling for a ceasefire in Gaza. It is beautiful. It is incredible. If you are listening to this and you have been a part of that, you are my hero, truly. And what that is highlighting and what current movements are highlighting right now in mid-May of 2024 is that we need things at all levels. I feel like it takes me almost away from taking the bait, right? From people with more power hoping that everyone feels doomism, because that's convenient if we're not fighting, if we're just overwhelmed, right? That's really convenient for people who are profiting off the destruction of the earth and the abuse of living beings in that destruction and in its path. So we are seeing students all over the world pushing their universities to pull investments from arms and to stop investing in basically helping deal arms to Israel right now in the war on Gaza. And students have been absolutely steadfast in why they're doing it, right? There's all those shitty narratives around like students are just protesting because blah, blah, blah. Let's remember that students are usually never on the wrong side of history. We always look back in history books and we're like, wow, how brave were they? But in the moment, people really hate it. People really hate it when it's actually the moment of challenging power. But these students have already, there have been universities that have pulled and that have divested. And there are others starting to meet demands as well. And these are mostly peaceful protests. Any of the harm and any of the violence that has come from the anti-protesters. And it's been really beautiful to be reminded that our actions matter. That right there should be enough to remind us that our actions can do something in big ways. Those are big things they are changing. And they are also saying, I want to know, where else was our money going? Where else is my money going that I am giving to you? That should be open. That should be something we all know. And it's incredible. So you have that. You have physically showing up. You have donating. You have finding out how to divest your own money on a personal level. Where do you put your money? What do you invest in? You can share on social media, and let's not underestimate the power of social media, because another movement we're seeing that is inspiring, that is keeping the climate anxiety at bay and the anxiety about basically pick an issue in the world is the Blackout 2024. After the Met Gala, that was basically the Hunger Games. Celebrities paying so much money to even get a ticket and be there in these end of the world looking woodsy costumes, and so many had not said anything about Palestine or calling for a ceasefire. And so the internet was like, hey, we actually control how these celebrities make money in so many ways. So let's make a list. And if they were there at the Met Gala and they haven't spoken out, let's not only unfollow them, let's block them, because it prevents them from getting as much ad revenue. And there have been celebrities that are getting blocked and losing tens of thousands of followers. And that is just another example of how your actions that seem seemingly small, right, are making big shifts. You can make big shifts with your everyday actions because you are becoming part of a collective. If you move in a collective movement, your actions are doing a lot. And there have been these recent examples. I bring these up because I have been disheartened in the last few months by so many things in the world, and I still am. But there have been these examples lately that pull me out of that a little bit more quick, and that show movement, and that young people are just driving forward, and that kind of blows the idea of climate doomism out of the water. Because look what we can do. Look what folks can do. And let that inspire you. I've talked about this before, but it is not a badge of honor to always be the most upset, angry person. It is valid to be upset and angry. That is not a question. But to find joy, to find inspiration, I mentioned this in a social media post the other day, but the idea of radically imagining the future and being able to pause and really say, okay, yeah, I can imagine this getting better. Because if we can't even imagine it, how are we supposed to create it, right? And so let this inspire you. Let this help you find some joy from the movements that are making change right now. There are celebrities and influencers and content creators being pushed to share about these things. And sometimes, of course, it's frustrating, and there are lines to draw on they should have done more, too little, too late. That's for other people to decide on their own. But I saw a quote the other day about how an activist who had been doing work for decades said, we even need, I'm paraphrasing, we still need the people that woke up later, because we need everyone. If we would have figured it out, it wouldn't be this bad. So more and more people are using their platform, and it's incredible. And so I wanted to use this episode to remind you, of course, that anger is valid, frustration is valid, even some doom is valid, but to not get sucked into that, because we need you. We need you fighting for this world to be better. And if we get sucked into the idea that there is nothing worth fighting for and that we're doomed, not only will you suffer, but everyone will. So remember these moments that these students are leading, that young people are leading on social media. That is tangible, direct ways that individual action turns into a collective and makes change. Makes universities divest their investments. Like, that is huge. Last month, I recorded a solo episode about Earth Day, and the origin was student activism. We need all these different ways, your individual, all the way to top level, to unravel systems of oppression. And climate doomism is a scare tactic, honestly, because it's convenient. It's convenient if we're tired. So remember to find ways to take care of yourself, because diving into these things are also heavy. Once you learn about them, if you didn't have to, if you were able to use your privilege and maybe these conversations are newer to you, remember to also take care of yourself, because that is so real in this fight. That is so important for you to be able to push through the doomism, right? To be able to push through the anxiety and to see how your actions can make a difference, because they absolutely can. Never forget that. If you're hearing this message, you've listened to the entire episode of Consciously Clueless. And for that, thank you so much. I hope you enjoyed this episode. And if you did, please leave a review on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, tag me when you share on social media, or share this episode with others who may be interested in the topic. Any sharing truly means the world to me. Join the community at patreon.com/consciouslycarly for bonus podcast content like smoke sessions with Consciously Cannabis guests, video versions of solo episodes, monthly live calls, one-to-one support, more lifestyle content, mindfulness resources, and more. Until next time, stay consciously clueless.